exciting news. Your client has said to you, yeah, let's get going. There's only one problem. They want to start right now. Let's talk about how to respond if your client says, yeah, I'm ready to go right now. How do you respond? Hi, I'm Shawn Casemore, and I help you learn how to be a high-performing sales professional so you can close more business in less time. If that sounds good to you, and it sounds good to me, so it should sound good to you, make sure you click the subscribe button so you can be notified each and every time I release a new video, which is typically every week. And if you click the bell button, any other updates or changes that happen, you will also be notified. Now, let's get into it. All right, so your client has said, let's get started right now, but you're panicking, at least inside. Hopefully you don't show the client or customer you're panicking. But here's the thing. What if you've got a product that you sell that has a long lead time? Maybe it's 8 weeks, maybe it's 6 months, and they want to get that product or that piece of equipment here now.
I want one. I want a golden goose.
Or maybe you're selling a service that involves coordinating all sorts of other people, which can take weeks, and yet again, the client wants to start right now. How do you respond? I'm going to give you 5 different ways to respond. You choose which makes the most sense. But here's the key. You do not want to divert to saying, well, I'd love to get started now, however. Or, you know, we can't get started because we have such a long lead time. That is not where you want to go. There's energy, there's enthusiasm. We want to run with that and keep that high so that we can keep this deal moving ahead. So let's jump into tip number 1. Now again, this works whether you're selling a product or a service, but you can get started right now. And here's an example of what you can say. You can say something like, be happy to get started. I just have a few questions as part of our onboarding process. If you have a few minutes now, we can jump right into them. Now, if you're panicking thinking, I don't have any questions, Shawn, that's okay. Come up with some typical questions. When a new client is brought on board, what are the typical things that you need to learn about them? Maybe it's a formal company address. Maybe it's the people who will be involved in this project. Maybe it's key contact points. Maybe it's payment terms, maybe it's financing. Depending on what you're selling, there's always some information that naturally tends to flow once you ink the deal. So simply have some questions ready to address that. Of course, if you ask the questions and they don't have an answer immediately, that's okay. You've begun the process of moving this forward, so it addresses the client's concern about wanting to start right now. Let's jump into tip number 2, because there's another way you can approach this. Tip number 2, maybe questions based on what you're selling don't make sense, or maybe you don't believe that there's enough there to make your client feel comfortable that you're actually moving things forward. Again, think about the typical steps that happen when a new customer or new client comes on board. Oftentimes they'll have to speak with someone to discuss how things are going to progress and to allow that internal department or person in your company to ask them some questions. All you need to do is identify who those people or that person is. And when the client says to you, I'm ready to go right now, you can say, great. The first step we typically take is to have you speak with our blank. Could be production manager, finance, you name it. So you insert their department and their name, and you say, I'd like to introduce you and get the first call set up. Do you have your calendar available? Give me some dates and times. I can coordinate that today. So again, we're showing a client or a customer that we're moving things forward by taking them on the first step.
That's one small step for man.
That's the underlying message I want you to understand, that in most cases, our clients or our customers really just want to see some momentum. They don't necessarily expect you to deliver at that very moment unless you're selling something that's really simple. So if you can demonstrate by your actions, your behaviors, and the language you use that, hey, we're now moving ahead, that will often satisfy that need. If you've enjoyed these tips so far, make sure you hit that like button. That allows me to know whether or not this is content you'd like to hear more of. And if you click the subscribe button, you'll get notified each and every time I release a new video, which is almost every single week. Let's keep going with the tips on what to do when your client says, let's get started right now. Okay, these first couple examples are really focused around maybe more of a service or some kind of process that doesn't require you shipping a product immediately. So let's talk about you're selling a piece of equipment, something that has a 6-month lead time, and your client says, this is great, I want to get started right now. Here's a response you can use. You can say, that's great. The first step, believe it or not, is to really identify the shipping method you'd like to use and a few key questions around shipping so we can coordinate this. As you might imagine, this is a large piece of whatever it is, piece of equipment, press, you name it. So we've got to make sure we've got all this ready to go for when we deliver. If I can ask you a few questions, we can make sure we get this all set up so we're ready to ship. Will that work for you? So again, notice we're creating momentum. We're responding to the client or the customer's request to get things moving right now. Let's jump in to number 4. Number 4. That's 4, that's 3. We're gonna go to 4 right now. Now let's say on that last example, you are delivering a piece of equipment, or it could be something that's mobile, it could be something that's a tool, a machine they'll have on the shop floor. And again, they're looking for this right now. And maybe you've tried some of these examples, but your customers come back or your clients come back and said, no, I want it delivered right now. Okay, well, you can't probably deliver it at that very moment. And if they're not accepting of you creating some momentum, you need to have in your back pocket some options that you can get them started right now. What does that look like? Well, I've got a client, for example, that sells equipment to their customers, and they found there was always a demand to have the equipment faster than they can build it. So one of my clients started creating inventory, which I know is a no-no, but as long as sales keeps the demand going, having a piece of equipment in inventory makes a lot of sense. So I have a client that does that. I have another client, totally separate industry, but again is selling a big piece of equipment that they ended up taking a used piece of equipment from an existing customer. They gave them a trade-in value, they refurbished that, and they offer that as a loaner. So again, if their customer is saying, I want to get started right now, I need this right now, they've got this loaner that they can say, well, we won't have your piece of equipment ready for 6 months. However, we have a loaner we can install next week. Let's talk about how to get that coordinated. The other side of this is that if your response that suggests momentum is not working, what you can do is work internally to have something set up that you can provide your customer right now. And I would say the most difficult situation for you is if you are providing a piece of equipment, something that has an extremely long lead time. How do you satisfy a need right now? Well, I've given you 2 examples, and I'm sure if you start showing this demand that you're having internally, you'll get a lot of buy-in to making these small investments to put these together. Now, with that said, I have got one more tip I want to share with you, so hold on just a second and we'll get right to it. All right, this is number 5. The last couple tips I shared were really if you've got a piece of equipment or something with a long lead time, kind of a physical item that you have to deliver. Let's go back and talk about one more tip if you have a service. And again, similar to point number 4, let's say that your discussion you're having, your suggestions on creating some momentum for your client are not working. They're saying, no, I want some people. Let's assume it's a service man. I want some people on site tomorrow. How do you get that going if that's not really possible? Well, take a look internally at your process. If you're selling something that requires people, right, resources that need to be available, can you have one person connect with them remotely for a brief call later in the afternoon?
Hello there.
All we need to do here, especially in a services environment, is show our client that we're moving things forward. And if your language and your suggestion on initial steps isn't working, then you need to be prepared to bring a person, maybe even in remotely, for a quick meeting. It can be as simple as a 20-minute virtual call where they ask a few questions of the client, and that will satisfy that client's need to know things are moving along. All right, if you're in sales, having a proven method by which you can get to the point where your client's saying, let's get started right now. I mean, let's be honest, this is not the worst problem in the world to have, especially if you've been in sales for a while. Sometimes just getting attention is a challenge. All right, I hope you've enjoyed these tips. One last resource for you. If you've been in sales for any period of time, introducing changes to how you're doing things, such as what we've talked about today, can be a challenge. It's for that reason I created what I call the 30-day Sales Action Planner. There's a link below. You can grab your copy. It's no charge. It's my gift to you. It's a way to try and help you plan and introduce changes that will help you be more effective. So make sure you click that link below and grab your copy right away. What I'd like you to do next is give some thought to how you can use these strategies we've talked about and be more influential with your conversations. Let's be honest, this objection that we've talked about could derail your entire deal. So we want to make sure we're influential in how we speak to our prospects to make sure that any objections such as this one or others don't stop the deal from moving ahead. So for that reason, make sure you check out this next video in the corner of the screen that will help you be more influential as a salesperson. And until next time, why don't you get out there, let's go sell something. We'll talk to you soon. Take care.